She collapsed before Pack from her weak heat, and opened her eyes to Alpha King watching over her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character, Myra. Myra had always known that being an Omega in a pack full of strong alphas meant she would never be given the respect she deserved. She had always been seen as weak, insignificant, a burden to the pack. But she never imagined that her moment of greatest vulnerability would come so soon. The pack had gathered for a sacred ritual. The air was thick with anticipation as alphas stood tall, their eyes fixed on the Omega they would claim as their mate. Myra, however, could barely stand. The heat she felt, a weak pulse of fire within her, was enough to leave her struggling to keep herself composed. She had always known her heat was different from the others, less intense, less powerful, and that made her feel inadequate, unworthy of any alpha's attention. The pack watched her with silent judgment as her knees buckled, and she collapsed in front of them all. The murmurs began, cruel, mocking whispers. Pathetic. What good is a weak Omega like her? She can't even handle her heat. Myra felt the sting of their words deep in her heart. She was no longer sure if she could hold herself together. Everything around her felt like it was crashing down, and she wanted to disappear, to vanish into the shadows where no one would ever see her weakness again. But just as she felt herself slipping into darkness, she heard a voice, a commanding, powerful voice that cut through the air like a blade. Enough. The pack fell silent. Every eye turned toward the figure who had spoken. It was him, the Alpha King, Kael Thornridge. Tall, broad-shouldered, his presence was as commanding as a storm. He strode forward, his steps sure and filled with purpose. Myra's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. The Alpha King, who never paid attention to someone like her, was walking toward her. But he wasn't angry. No, he looked down at her with something far different, something tender, protective, almost concerned. Kael knelt beside her, lifting her face with gentle hands. The crowd was still, watching, waiting for what would happen next. She is mine, Kael said, his voice firm, unwavering. Touch her again, and you will regret it. His words rang out like a declaration, a challenge to the pack that none of them had expected. Myra's eyes widened in shock as she looked into the Alpha King's eyes, the intensity of his gaze burning through her. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. She felt valued. And in that moment, everything changed. No longer was she the weak, rejected Omega. She was his. The pack remained silent, unsure of how to react. Kael had just claimed her, publicly, in front of all of them. It was unheard of. No Alpha would ever dare do something like this for an Omega like Myra. But Kael did. And for Myra, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she was no longer invisible, no longer ignored. She was Myra, the chosen one of the Alpha King. After Alpha King Kael claimed Myra as his own, the entire pack stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock. Myra was still kneeling on the ground, her hands trembling as she tried to process what had just happened. The Alpha King, the most powerful man in their entire pack, had spoken for her, had defended her, and had claimed her as his mate in front of everyone. She couldn't understand it. She was just a weak, rejected Omega. Why had Kael chosen her? Why not someone strong, someone who could contribute to the pack? The murmurs from the pack members slowly began to rise again, but this time, it wasn't with mockery. There was confusion, disbelief, and even awe. Alpha Kael stood tall beside Myra, his presence like a shield protecting her from the world. No one will dare speak of her like that again, he commanded, his voice unwavering. Myra felt the weight of his words settle deep within her. For the first time in her life, someone had stood up for her, someone had valued her. But why was it him? Kael's eyes softened as he looked down at Myra, his gaze full of a tenderness she never expected from someone of his power. He extended a hand to her, and though she was hesitant at first, she took it. The moment their hands touched, an electric current shot through her, like the world had suddenly shifted. Her heart raced. She was suddenly acutely aware of the Alpha King standing right beside her, so close, so powerful. Kael's touch was gentle, his fingers warm against her cold skin. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Myra opened her mouth to speak, but found that her voice had failed her. She could hardly believe the situation she was in. The Alpha King, the ruler of the pack, was asking about her well-being. She had never experienced such kindness before, especially not from someone of his stature. She started, but her words faltered. "I'm fine," she finally managed to say, though her heart still pounded in her chest. Kael's lips twitched into a small smile, but it was enough to make Myra's heart skip. He helped her to her feet, his touch firm but reassuring. The moment she stood, the world around her seemed to shift. The pack was still silent, all eyes fixed on them. Kael had always been the embodiment of strength, a figure who commanded respect from everyone in the pack. But now, as he stood there beside her, his actions had shifted the dynamic. No one had expected him to claim a weak Omega, but here she was, standing beside him. He turned to the pack, his voice booming once again. "Myra will no longer be treated as an outsider. She is under my protection. Any who dare defy that will answer to me." Myra's breath hitched as the weight of his words settled in. He was serious. He meant every word. Kael was not just protecting her. He was making sure that the pack understood her value. He was making sure that she would no longer be pushed aside or ridiculed. The pack members shifted uneasily, but none dared speak against him. Myra could feel the shift in the air. It was as if the world had changed, as if she had gone from being invisible, someone no one cared about, to someone who mattered. Someone who was important enough for the Alpha King to fight for. And then, Kael turned to her, his expression softening. "Come with me," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Myra nodded, still in shock, and followed him as he led her away from the pack. They walked through the forest in silence, the quiet of the night wrapping around them like a blanket. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow over the path ahead. Myra felt a sense of calm wash over her as she walked beside Kael, though her mind was still racing. What was going on? Why had he done this for her? Why had he chosen to protect her? As they reached the edge of the clearing, Kael stopped and turned to her. "You are not weak, Myra," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "You have a strength within you that you have yet to realize. I see it, and I will help you find it." Myra looked up at him, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Kael had always been a figure of legend, someone who seemed untouchable, unreachable. But here he was, standing before her, speaking to her like she mattered. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kael gave her a small smile, his eyes filled with something that made Myra's chest tighten. "You don't need to thank me," he said quietly. "This is only the beginning." Myra nodded, not fully understanding what he meant, but feeling a spark of something deep inside her. This was the beginning of something new, something she had never dared to hope for. And for the first time in her life, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was finally where she belonged. As the days passed, Myra found herself adjusting to this new life beside Alpha Kael, the Alpha King who had claimed her as his mate. It was strange, overwhelming even, to go from being a neglected, weak Omega to being the center of attention, the object of protection from someone so powerful. She had always believed that she was unworthy of such attention, that she was too insignificant to be noticed by someone like Kael. Yet here she was, by his side, with the entire pack watching her every move. At first, she struggled with the weight of the pack's eyes on her, the whispers that followed her wherever she went. They still didn't fully understand Kael's decision. They had never seen him act this way before, especially not toward an Omega like her. But as time went on, Kael's words continued to echo in her mind. "You are not weak, Myra. You have a strength within you that you have yet to realize." These words, simple but powerful, gave her something she had never had before, a sense of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as weak as she had always believed. Kael had been right. There was something within her, something she had never tapped into, and he was determined to help her find it. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountain range, Kael called Myra to his study. The large wooden doors creaked open, and she stepped inside, her heart pounding. She had never been in his private quarters before. The room was dimly lit, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the walls. Kael sat behind a large desk, his dark eyes watching her as she approached. "Sit with me," he said, his voice calm and inviting. Myra hesitated for a moment before she slowly made her way toward the chair across from him. As she sat down, she could feel the tension in the air. There was something important about to happen, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Kael leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her with a piercing intensity that made her heart race. "Myra, you have a power within you," he began, his voice low and steady. "I've seen it in you, but it's buried deep, hidden by your doubts and fears. I want to help you unlock it." Myra stared at him, unsure of what to say. The idea that she had any kind of power seemed impossible. She was just an Omega, someone who was always seen as weak and insignificant. But Kael's presence, his unwavering belief in her, made her question everything she had known about herself. "I know you're afraid," Kael continued, "but I promise you, you're not alone in this. I will be here to guide you." Myra nodded slowly, still processing his words. Could it be true? Could she really have the strength to change her fate, to become more than just a weak Omega? Kael smiled softly, sensing her hesitation. "I will train you, Myra," he said, his tone full of conviction. "We will start tomorrow. There is no time to waste. You need to learn how to control your powers, to harness them." The idea of training under Kael, of learning to control something she hadn't even known she had, was both exciting and terrifying. But there was something in his gaze that made her believe she could do it, that she wasn't as hopeless as she once thought. The following days were filled with intense training. Kael was patient but firm, pushing her beyond her limits in ways she never imagined possible. At first, Myra struggled, her body aching from the exertion, her mind clouded with doubts. But Kael was always there, encouraging her, showing her how to tap into her inner strength. "Focus, Myra," he would say. "Trust in yourself. You have more power than you realize." With each passing day, Myra began to feel the change. She could feel something stirring within her, something that had been dormant for so long. It was as if a light had been ignited deep inside her, and slowly, she was learning to control it. One afternoon, as she stood in the clearing outside the palace, Kael instructed her to focus on the energy within her. "Let it flow through you," he said. "Don't fight it. Let it become part of you." Myra closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the energy building inside her, like a storm ready to break. For the first time, she didn't fight it. She embraced it, allowing it to surge through her body. When she opened her eyes, she saw the results, small sparks of light dancing around her hands. She gasped in awe. "You did it," Kael said, his voice full of pride. "You're beginning to understand your power." Myra looked at him, a mixture of disbelief and amazement in her eyes. Could it really be this simple? Could she really have power, real power, within her? Kael's smile widened. "This is only the beginning, Myra. There's much more to discover, but you are on the right path." In that moment, Myra knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega she had once been. She was someone who mattered. She was someone who had the potential to be something great. And with Kael by her side, she knew she would find the strength she had always kept hidden deep inside. As the days turned into weeks, Myra's training under Alpha Kael continued. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and a deeper understanding of her inner power. Kael had been patient but persistent, pushing her to her limits, showing her that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The progress she made was nothing short of remarkable. Myra had learned to control the energy within her, harnessing it to manifest small bursts of light or warmth. But today, Kael had something more difficult in mind. "We're going to push further today, Myra," he said, his voice steady with authority. "You need to learn to control not just the power within you, but also how to protect yourself when the time comes." Myra stood in the clearing, her heart racing in anticipation. She had grown accustomed to Kael's intense gaze and the weight of his expectations, but today felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air. "I'm ready," Myra replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Kael nodded and raised his hand, signaling for her to focus. "Close your eyes. Focus on the energy within you, the power that lies dormant just beneath the surface. Feel it. Let it become a part of you." Myra did as instructed, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She focused inward, feeling the familiar hum of energy swirling deep inside her chest. She had learned to control it before, but this time, Kael wanted her to do something more, something that would test her limits. As the power grew within her, she felt it course through her veins, filling her with a strength she had never known. She could feel it in her hands, in the tips of her fingers. She raised her arms, and just as Kael had instructed, she unleashed the power in a burst. A blinding light erupted from her palms, dazzling in its intensity. For a moment, Myra stood frozen, staring at the energy she had created. She had never imagined herself capable of such a display. The light flickered and wavered, but it was there, real and undeniable. Kael's voice broke through the silence. Good. But now, Myra, you must learn control. As soon as he spoke, the light in her hands flickered out, and the energy inside her receded. Kael took a step forward, his eyes never leaving her. You have power, but power without control is dangerous. Myra nodded, breathing heavily. She had felt the energy surge inside her, but the loss of control had left her feeling vulnerable. Kael could see the doubt in her eyes, but he did not falter. You're stronger than you think, he said gently, but you must trust yourself. Myra took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had always doubted her abilities, always felt that she wasn't enough. But Kael's faith in her, his unwavering belief that she could become something greater, filled her with determination. I will try again, she said quietly. Kael smiled and nodded, stepping back to give her space. I know you will. With renewed resolve, Myra focused once more on the energy within her. She closed her eyes, reaching deep inside, and this time, she allowed the power to rise slowly, gently, as Kael had taught her. She felt it swell in her chest, felt it gather in her hands, and this time, when she opened her eyes, she focused on the light in her palms. Slowly, carefully, she guided the energy, allowing it to grow without overwhelming her. The light shone brighter, but it remained steady, controlled, a reflection of her growing strength. Myra smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she had never known. She was beginning to understand what Kael had meant when he said she had power. It wasn't just about raw strength. It was about control, focus, and trust in herself. As the light dimmed and faded, Kael stepped forward again, his face proud. You did it, he said softly. You've learned control. Now you're ready. Ready for what? Myra thought, her heart still racing with excitement and uncertainty. She had proven something to herself today, but what did it mean? What was Kael preparing her for? Before she could ask, Kael spoke again. We have much more to do, Myra. The power within you will not just protect you. It will protect others. When the time comes, you will need to be ready. Myra nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. What was he preparing her for? Was she truly ready to protect not just herself, but those around her? She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing. Kael was right. She was stronger than she had ever realized. She was learning, growing, and with each passing day, she was becoming something more than she had ever thought possible. As she stood therein, the clearing, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, Myra couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and hope. She wasn't just the weak, rejected Omega anymore. She was someone who had power, who had control, and who had a future. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed in herself. Days turned into weeks, and Myra's growth continued. With every training session, she felt herself becoming stronger, more confident in her abilities, and more certain that she was no longer the same fragile Omega who had once been discarded by her pack. But despite her progress, something still lingered in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that Kael had been preparing her for, though he hadn't told her the full extent of what it was. Her thoughts were interrupted when Kael called for her one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. She followed him to the training grounds, the shadows lengthening as they walked together in silence. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. Kael's stride was steady and purposeful, and Myra couldn't help but feel a little nervous, despite everything she had learned. She had never seen him like this before. His expression was serious, almost foreboding. When they reached the center of the training grounds, Kael stopped and turned to face her. Myra, he began, his voice low but firm, it's time. Myra's heart skipped a beat. Time for what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, she saw something in them. Something heavy, something that spoke of a future she wasn't fully prepared for. I've trained you for what's coming, he said, his tone unwavering. And now, you must face it. Myra felt a chill run down her spine. Face what? She repeated, though she already knew the answer. Kael's expression softened, and for a brief moment, he placed a hand on her shoulder, a reassuring touch that steadied her nerves. The pack is no longer what it once was. The wolves that you've known, the ones who once rejected you, they are not the same anymore. You've been given this power, Myra, but it's not just for you. It's for the pack, for the future. Myra swallowed hard, her mind racing. The weight of his words settled in her chest, and she felt a surge of anxiety and determination. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was someone with power, someone who could change the course of her future. But what did Kael mean by the future? What was she supposed to do with all this power? Before she could speak, Kael continued. There are those within the pack who question my leadership, he said, his voice laced with a quiet intensity. They see your strength, your potential, and they fear what it means. Fear of change, fear of losing control. They will test you, Myra. Myra's heart raced. How will I know what to do? She asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Kael's gaze softened, and he took a step closer, his presence grounding her. You will trust yourself. You will trust the power that's inside you. You've learned control, but now you need to learn how to lead. Myra's breath caught. Led? Her? She was just an Omega, someone who had spent most of her life overlooked, dismissed, and now she was supposed to lead? I believe in you, Myra, Kael said, his words gentle but filled with conviction. You are ready. The pack needs you to be strong, to be the leader I know you can be. Myra felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Kael's words weren't just about training or power. They were about trust, about belief in her ability to rise above her past and become something greater. She nodded, more determined than ever. I will lead, she said, her voice steady, stronger than she had ever heard it. For the pack, for us. Kael smiled, the pride in his eyes evident. That's the spirit, Myra. Now, let's show the pack what you're capable of. The tension that had built in Myra's chest melted away as she focused on Kael's words. She was ready. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was someone with the power to protect, to lead, to create change. And with Kael by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Myra was no longer the fragile, broken Omega she had once been. She was someone who would fight for the pack, for her future, and for the love that Kael had shown her. As the sun set behind the mountains, Myra stood tall, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The following days were filled with tension as Myra prepared for the test that Kael had warned her about. She had never been asked to lead before, let alone face the pack that had once rejected her. The weight of responsibility was heavier than she had imagined, but with each passing day, she could feel the strength growing within her, the power that had once seemed so distant now at her command. Kael had made it clear. This was the moment that would define her future, and hers alone. As Myra stood before the pack the next morning, her heart pounded in her chest. The sun had barely risen, and the pack had gathered in the clearing, their eyes fixed on her with curiosity and skepticism. They were unsure of her, just as she had once been unsure of herself. Kael stood beside her, a silent pillar of strength, his eyes never leaving the crowd. Today, you will see what Myra is capable of, he said, his voice commanding. The pack murmured among themselves, the tension thick in the air. Myra could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their judgment pressing down. But this time, it didn't feel like rejection. It felt like anticipation. Kael stepped forward, his presence demanding attention, and with a single movement, he gestured for Myra to take the first step. She hesitated for only a moment before she took a step forward, her breath steady as she looked into the sea of eyes watching her. I am Myra, mate to Alpha Kael, she said, her voice steady, though it shook with the weight of the moment. The pack fell silent. I may not have the strength of the alphas or the speed of the betas, but I have something you can't see. I have the power to protect this pack, to lead it into a future where we no longer fear the unknown. Her words hung in the air, heavy and sure. Myra felt a surge of energy within her, a power she had learned to control, a power she now knew was hers to wield. Kael watched her, his eyes filled with pride. He knew this was the moment she had been preparing for, The moment when she would show the pack that she was no longer the weak Omega they had once mocked. He stepped back, allowing Myra to take center stage. She focused on the energy within her, the same power she had trained with, the same power she had learned to control. Her hands crackled with the raw energy of her abilities, the light flickering at her fingertips as she concentrated, drawing the power from within. The air around her seemed to shimmer as the energy swirled, the ground beneath her feet trembling as if responding to the strength she was now commanding. "This is my power," she said, her voice rising with confidence. "And I will use it to protect this pack, to protect all of us." Myra extended her hands, and with a flash of light, a burst of energy shot into the sky. The force of it was enough to make the pack step back in awe. It wasn't just a display of power, it was a statement. Myra had arrived. She was not just an Omega. She was a leader, a protector. The pack stood in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. For the first time, they saw her for what she truly was. Not weak, not insignificant, but someone who had the strength to command their respect. Kael stepped forward, his voice strong and proud. "This is your Luna," he declared, his eyes scanning the pack. "She will lead us into a future where we are strong, united, and unstoppable." The pack remained silent for a moment, their disbelief fading into a quiet reverence. Then, one by one, they bowed their heads, acknowledging Myra as their Luna, their leader. Myra felt a surge of emotion, the weight of the moment settling in. She had done it. She had proven to them, and to herself, that she was more than just the weak Omega she had once believed herself to be. She was someone who had the strength to protect, to lead, and to shape the future of the pack. As the pack slowly dispersed, Kael approached her, a proud smile on his face. "You did it," he said softly. Myra nodded, her heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment she had never known. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. Kael's smile deepened as he reached for her hand. "You've always had this strength, Myra. I just helped you find it." As they stood together in the clearing, the weight of the moment sinking in, Myra knew that this was just the beginning. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was Myra, the Luna of the pack, and with Kael by her side, there was nothing she couldn't accomplish. As the days passed, Myra's new role as Luna began to take shape, but so did the challenges that came with it. While the pack had accepted her, there were still murmurs, still whispers from the wolves who weren't fully convinced of her strength. They had seen her as weak for so long. It would take more than just a display of power to change their minds. The pressure was mounting, and Myra could feel it with every step she took as she walked beside Kael. Every decision she made was under scrutiny, every move she made judged. It was a heavy burden, but one she was learning to carry. Kael, ever the constant presence by her side, had been her rock, offering guidance and support whenever the weight of the position felt too much to bear. But even with Kael's reassurance, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was she truly ready to lead? Could she protect the pack the way Kael had, the way they needed her to? She often found herself walking alone in the quiet of the palace grounds, the weight of her new responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. It was during one of these moments that she encountered a pack member who had once mocked her. Kaden, a strong beta wolf, was standing in the courtyard, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. Myra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Luna," he said with a tone that was both respectful and distant. "I need to speak with you." Myra approached him cautiously, her heart racing. Was this a challenge? Was he going to confront her over her leadership? But as she came closer, Kaden's expression softened. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I've seen the way you've stepped up. You've proven us wrong." Myra's heart skipped a beat. She had expected anything but this. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said, surprised by the honesty in his words. "I didn't think I could ever be someone like Kael, someone strong enough to lead. But watching how you handled things, I see it now. You have the strength to lead, to protect us." Myra didn't know what to say. She had always thought that the pack would never see her as their equal, that they would always look down on her because of her past. But here was one of them, acknowledging her strength, and for the first time, Myra felt a real sense of belonging. "Thank you, Kaden," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It means more than you know." Kaden nodded, his eyes filled with respect. "We're with you, Luna. We believe in you." As he walked away, Myra stood there for a moment, absorbing his words. She had faced so much doubt, so much rejection, and now she was finally beginning to see the results of her hard work. She was no longer just Kael's mate or the weak Omega she had once been. She was a leader, someone who had earned the pack's trust, and that trust was something she would never take for granted. Later that evening, as she sat beside Kael at the head of the pack's dinner table, she felt a quiet pride settle in her chest. The pack had gathered, their faces filled with respect as they looked to her for guidance. Kael reached for her hand under the table, squeezing it gently, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone in this. "You've done well, Myra," Kael said softly, his eyes filled with pride. "You're becoming the leader I always knew you could be." Myra looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had spent so much of her life doubting herself, wondering if she could ever be more than just a weak, invisible Omega. But here she was, surrounded by those who believed in her, and beside the one person who had always seen her potential. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered, her voice filled with sincerity. Kael smiled, his eyes soft. "You've always had it in you. I just helped you find it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, but Myra felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had earned the pack's respect, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. As the night drew to a close, Myra and Kael stood together at the balcony, watching the stars twinkle above. "This is just the beginning," Kael said, his voice low. "The road ahead will be challenging, but you're ready for it." Myra nodded, her heart full. She was ready for whatever came next, for the challenges and the triumphs, for the journey that lay ahead. With Kael by her side and the pack behind her, she knew there was nothing she couldn't face. She was no longer just the weak Omega. She was Myra, the Luna, and she would lead her pack to greatness. The days that followed were both challenging and rewarding for Myra. As Luna, she faced the responsibility of leading her pack with a quiet strength that she never knew she had. There were times when doubts crept into her mind, when the weight of leadership seemed almost unbearable, but Kael's presence was a constant source of comfort. He had always been by her side, guiding her with wisdom and patience, but it was clear that now, more than ever, he was allowing her to find her own way. The pack respected her, but there were still challenges ahead. Myra knew that there were wolves within the pack who had not yet fully accepted her, wolves who resented her for being chosen by Kael. Some were still reluctant to follow her lead, preferring the old ways of alpha rule, where power and dominance were what mattered most. But Myra had learned that true leadership wasn't about power. It was about trust, respect, and the ability to unite others toward a common goal. She had earned the pack's trust, and she would continue to prove herself worthy of it every day. One evening, as the pack gathered for a meeting, Myra stood at the front, her heart steady as she addressed the crowd. Kael stood beside her, a silent support, but this was her moment. "The pack has always been strong, but we will be stronger if we stand together," she said, her voice strong and clear. "We must not let fear or division tear us apart. We are family, and that is what makes us unstoppable." The room was silent, the pack listening intently. Myra could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their expectations pressing down, but she didn't falter. This was her time to lead, to show them that she was more than just Kael's mate. She was their Luna, their leader. She continued, "We have faced many challenges, but the future is bright. We are strong because we trust each other, and that trust is what will carry us forward." A few of the wolves in the back exchanged glances, but there was no dissent, no murmurs of disagreement. Myra could feel the shift. She had spoken from the heart, and they were listening. The next few weeks saw a transformation within the pack. Slowly but surely, Myra earned the respect of those who had once doubted her. They saw her not as the weak Omega who had been discarded, but as a powerful leader who had the courage to stand up for them. She was no longer just an outsider looking in. She was part of the pack, their Luna, their guiding force. As the pack's bond grew stronger, so did Myra's sense of purpose. She was no longer the uncertain, fragile girl who had once doubted her worth. She was a warrior in her own right, a force to be reckoned with. She had Kael to thank for that, for showing her the strength within herself that she had always kept hidden. But it was also her own journey, her own growth that had brought her to this point. One evening, as the pack gathered around the fire, Kael turned to her with a smile that warmed her heart. "You've done well, Myra," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I knew from the beginning that you had the strength to lead. You've proven it to everyone, especially yourself." Myra smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied softly, knowing that Kael's unwavering belief in her had made all the difference. Kael reached for her hand, his fingers gently brushing against hers. "You've always had it in you," he said. "I just gave you the chance to see it." As they stood together, watching the flames dance in the firelight, Myra realized that this was the life she had always wanted. She had fought for her place in the pack, and now she had earned it. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega. She was Myra, the Luna, and nothing would stand in her way. As the fire crackled and the pack celebrated their unity, Myra felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She had found her place, her purpose, and with Kael by her side, she knew they would face whatever challenges the future held together. As the seasons passed, Myra continued to grow into her role as Luna, the bond between her and the pack strengthening with each passing day. The once doubtful wolves who had watched her rise from the weak, rejected Omega now looked to her for guidance. Their respect and loyalty earned through her actions, her strength, and her unwavering commitment to their future. With Kael by her side, she led the pack with wisdom and compassion, learning more about her powers and herself every day. Together, they faced challenges, both internal and external. But no matter what came their way, they stood united, a force stronger than ever before. Myra had come to realize that true leadership wasn't just about power or strength. It was about understanding, patience, and the ability to inspire others. She had learned that it was okay to be vulnerable, to ask for help when she needed it, and that the support of those around her made her even stronger. As she stood with Kael one evening, looking out over the pack, Myra felt a deep sense of peace. They had come so far, from the struggles and doubts to the unshakable unity they now shared. The moonlight bathed them both in a silvery glow, and for a moment, Myra allowed herself to simply enjoy the quiet, knowing that her journey had just begun. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Myra said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. Kael looked at her, his expression gentle but filled with the pride he had always held for her. "You've come a long way," he replied, "but this is only the beginning." Myra smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. She had fought for this, fought for her place in the pack, fought for the respect she deserved, and most importantly, fought for the future she knew she could help create. "I never thought I would be here," Myra said, "but now that I am, I feel like I belong." Kael reached out, taking her hand in his grip warm and reassuring. "You always belonged here," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "and you always will." As the stars twinkled above them, Myra looked out over the pack once more, her heart filled with a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega she had once been. She was Myra, the Luna, and with Kael by her side, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together, as a united pack, ready to overcome anything that the future held. She had found her strength, her purpose, and her place in the world. And as the night embraced them, Myra knew that her journey, though only just beginning, would be one of greatness, filled with challenges, love, and the unwavering support of the pack she now led. In a world full of powerful werewolves, Myra was once seen as nothing more than a weak Omega, rejected and overlooked by her pack. But through determination and the unwavering support of Alpha Kael, she discovered her inner strength and embraced her true potential. As Myra grew into her role as Luna, the leader of the pack, she faced numerous challenges, proving that even the most vulnerable werewolves could rise to greatness. With Kael by her side, Myra led the pack with wisdom and compassion, transforming from the rejected Omega to a force of power and unity. Her journey wasn't just about gaining strength. It was about realizing that true leadership came from understanding and inspiring others, qualities that Myra embraced fully. Throughout the story, Myra navigated the complexities of werewolf politics, the responsibility of leadership, and the love that grew between her and Kael. Her rise to power was a testament to the strength of the werewolf spirit, showing that no matter where one starts, it's possible to carve a place among the strongest. The once weak Omega became a symbol of hope for the pack, showing that even in a world dominated by werewolves, anyone can become a leader if they believe in themselves. From the whispers of rejection to the pride of being Luna, Myra's transformation is the heart of this werewolf tale. As she faced the future alongside her Alpha King, Myra was no longer the outsider. She was a Luna, ready to lead her pack to a new dawn. The story of Myra is a beautiful reminder of the power of self-belief and the strength found in unity within the werewolf world.